that way.
I had hoped it would fire right up, but obviously that isn't the case. I'm not really sure why it's so reluctant, so I need to start checking for the basics like fuel, air and a spark. Now the throttle body cuts off all air at idle, and it relies on the idle valve to act as a bypass, so it's possible that that could be stuck in the closed position, which would starve the engine of air. To test this, all I need to do is wedge open the throttle while cranking. Right, well that wasn't the issue, so the next thing to do is to check for a spark. Yep, that's looking fine, although it doesn't mean it's sparking at the right time, of course. The timing could still be an issue, although it's not the most likely candidate. Having said that, I did swap the flywheel over, which has the pickup gear for the crankshaft sensor, which is vital to the timing, so I'm not going to rule out a timing issue just yet. One thing I did notice is that sometimes the ignition relay on the engine loom seems to play up a bit. Now, it's typical with this sort of thing, but I couldn't get it to do it on camera, but it does seem like it might be on its way out. Although we are getting a spark, so I don't really see how that could stop it running completely. I think the next thing to do is to check if there's any petrol up at the fuel rail. That's quite odd really. So we've got fuel, we've got air, and we've got a spark. So why isn't it running then? I still think it's unlikely to be a timing issue, so the next culprit that springs to mind is the injectors. Now these are from the donor engine, and I've no idea of their history, so it is a bit of a gamble to just expect them to work. But given that all 4 cylinders seem to be affected, I think it's unlikely to be the injectors themselves. You might get 1 or 2 that are sticking or have a poor spray pattern, but to stop the engine from running altogether is quite rare. Of course, the other thing that can stop the injectors working is if there's no signal getting to them. This can be caused by dodgy wiring, but again, to affect all 4 cylinders means it's more likely to be the ECU. Now, the wiring plugs on the injectors are sealed, so it's not that easy to test the pins with a multimeter, and of course the signals are in very short bursts, so it's quite hard to even see it on the instrument. So I think the next thing to do is to try the ECU from my other van, which I know is in working order. And I noticed one of the positive battery terminals was a bit corroded, so I'll give that a clean as well, although I doubt that'll be the issue. I'm also going to give the pins on the ECU connector a clean. Right, I've got the other ECU connected now, so let's try it again. Okay, at this stage it does seem to be pointing to an issue with the injectors. I've tried the original ECU on my other van and it started straight up, so I know that's working fine. I'd like to know for sure if it is fuel starvation, so I'm going to try an old trick which I've used in the past to see if that is the issue or if there's still something else at fault. Basically, I'm going to try and run it on propane using a blowtorch hooked up to a gas bottle. Now this may sound a bit dodgy, but it isn't actually that bad and it's not really that different to how the very early LPG conversions worked. Really, the only danger here is if it backfires, so I've got a fire extinguisher on standby just in case. This is definitely a 2-man job, so I've got my dad back in to help out. Now, you don't want to be releasing gas constantly, so he'll only squeeze the trigger once the engine's cranking, and if it doesn't fire up quickly, he'll shut it off.
Okay. Yeah. That fired up fine.
That definitely fired up fine, didn't it? Yeah.
Fine.
Should we try it again?
Yeah.
Did you keep going on the gas?
I did, yeah.
Yeah, so it did switch itself off then.
Probably, but I'll give it a bit more.
Okay. Right, the fuel pump's running now. So, it's a fueling issue. Yeah. Right, 2 days later, and I think I might have worked out what I've done wrong. If the fuel lines are reversed, then that means that we're not getting any pressure in the fuel rail. So we're getting fuel up there, but we're not getting any pressure. If those are reversed, that means that the pressure is going through the regulator first, and then the return is just flowing straight back into the tank. And that means that there's no pressure in the fuel rail in order for the injectors to release. So I'm going to try and swap those round and see if that makes a difference. Stop dribbling. The fuel rail will have some air in it now, so I'm not going to lose hope just yet. I'll cycle the ignition on and off a few times to help get the fuel up to the rail. That's promising. That's really promising. Well, there you go. Proof that the simplest problems are usually the hardest to find. I won't run it any more yet without the cooling system, but I'm very happy with how it sounded. The fast idle will be down to all the missing bits like the air filter assembly and the breather pipe, so I guess I better crack on with the rest of it. Now, I only had the front downpipe on, so that's why it was so loud, so I'll tackle the rest of the exhaust next. There's too many so's in that. What's a synonym for so? This van is a 1992 model, so in the UK it's not actually required to have a catalytic converter, but the later factory 2.2 models did come with them, so I will fit one here. The rest of the system is actually second hand. I've had it in storage for a few years and it's perfectly serviceable, so I might as well put it to good use. The inspection pit here isn't long enough to fully get to the back, so I'll leave the back box till the end when I can reverse the van in. Now the next bit to look at is the clutch cable. The new gearbox has the release arm on the other side, so the original cable is actually too long now. So I need to swap this out for a shorter one, and the first step is to remove the clutch pedal. There are a couple of plastic spaces in there which always fall out, so I need to be careful with those. And the pivot bracket also has to come off from the cable. Now to do this you need to gently open it up using a lever to separate it. This then allows the crimped end on the cable to be freed. Underneath the bulkhead you can see the outer cable. Now this just needs pulling firmly to dislodge it from the support plate. And now from under the van I can extract it out past the heat shield. Here's the two side by side for comparison. And the new one can then be fed through. The support bracket on the gearbox end is different to the 1.7. It's more of a compact box than a flat bracket, which does actually make it a bit harder in tight spaces, but there you go. And with that on, the rest of the run is just a reverse of removal. There's also a steel washer which goes in next to the pedal and it's a devil to get into place. And with that done, I can take a look at the gearbox end. This is just a case of tightening the nut until the clutch pedal feels about right. Now there's still too much slack, so I'll wind the nut up a bit more. Okay, let's try it again. Yeah, it could go a bit more, I reckon. That's better. And I'll wind the second nut on, which will lock it in place. Yep, looks good to me. Next up is the throttle cable. This has the opposite problem in that it's now too short, but luckily the donor engine did come with the right one. That's the pedal end released, so it just needs extracting through the bulkhead. And again, here's them together for comparison. This end uses a movable spring clip to adjust the tension, but as luck would have it, it was pretty much perfect as it was. Right, next job to tackle is the radiator. Now the one on the left here is the original, and the one on the right is the new 2.2 radiator. Now it's not a massive difference in size, but the new one does have a thicker core, and of course the hose outlets are completely different as well, so it really will be quite hard to try and keep the old radiator. Shame really, as it's barely 6 months old, but what can you do? The radiator is supported by the cross member, so that has to go on first. Now the 1.7 radiator was mounted directly over the cross member and had the cooling fan on the inside. The 2.2 radiator, however, is mounted behind the cross member, much closer to the engine, and it has the fan on the outside behind the grille. Here on my other van you can see that it has two brackets which pick up on the back side of the cross member. I've temporarily borrowed one here so that I can make a couple of copies. You can see that it picks up on some pre-existing holes using those cage nuts. These holes were only present on the later cross members, but this one does have them because it's actually from a 98 model. I changed it in the past as the old one was quite corroded. The only problem is that they don't seem to be quite in the right place, so I'll have to modify the design of the new brackets. I've mocked it up using a CAD template just to check everything fits how it should. Now, I've spoken with a few experts on this, and they've run it through the computer several times, but unfortunately the consensus is this cardboard isn't going to be strong enough. So I've got to make it out of steel. Yeah, that's better. I suppose you'll want to see how it was done now, won't you? Right, with a bit of luck, it should just slot into place. Like that. That's the lower support done, but it still needs bracing at the top from the slam panel. Now there's a bracket in the panel which ties into the rad using a rubber spacer, but of course this is now in the wrong position because the rad's moved back about 50mm. Now I haven't got another suitable slam panel as that would be the easy solution, so what I'm going to try and do is space this bracket as far back as it'll go and hope that's somewhere near where it should be. This is about as many washers as I could fit in here, so hopefully that'll push it back enough to meet the new radiator. The threads were a bit rusty, so another dab of oil should help. All it needs is a spacer to take up the difference in thickness between the old rad and the new one. It's not perfectly plumb, but it's close enough, and there's still loads more stuff to do to get this on the road, so for now I'll call it done. So join me next time when I carry on with the cooling system, finish off the new exhaust, and venture out onto the road. So, here we are out on the road.